folks, St. Augustine, Florida. Wow, that's an old city. Denver, Michigan. Wasn't the interview with Mallory McMorrow cool? I thought she was really interesting. I thought she did a great job. Um, yeah, well, Danny, it's finally getting warm here too. Good to see you and talk to you. And you know what? Facebook is here. I usually like to say hello to all the Facebook people when they come through, but you're all here. So I guess we'll just jump right to it. Your questions today were all sort of centered around the same things, and I was already going in a similar direction. So let me just take off and see if we end up in a place that you find useful. First of all, yes, South Park's first episode of its 27th season last night is important. A lot of people asked about that. It's certainly getting an enormous amount of traction. And I'll explain what was in it, but then why it's important. So, and just so you know here, I don't watch television and I rarely watch film, not because I object to it in any way. I wish I had more time to do it, but because I grew up without really a lot of access to TV and to movies. So I'm really unsophisticated about them. I've never really understood how to watch them, and I love them, but it just my habits were never formed around television or film. So the what I am explaining to you about what happened on South Park comes from Charlotte Clymer, who writes a Substack publication called Charlotte's Web Thoughts, and she covered this in some detail, and she knows the history of South Park far better than I do. I actually teach the writing of South Park because it's kind of geniusly written, but I don't know the history of South Park itself at all. So what I'm going to tell you comes from her. So the first episode that aired last night was just a skewering of Donald Trump and modern American Republican politics. And the thing that Charlotte pointed out was that in it, if you have followed South Park, you know that when just if anybody cares, I'm going to give some spoilers here. So if you don't want to hear what was in that, this would be a good time to go do something else and come back later, or just do something else. All right. So in the episode, the character that is the Donald Trump character climbs into bed with Satan, and they have a conversation. And in that conversation, the Satan alludes to how Donald Trump reminds him of a former boyfriend he had. And what Clymer points out is that in earlier episodes of South Park during the regime of Saddam Hussein, they used the same voice techniques, the same mannerisms that they put onto Trump now for Saddam Hussein. So they were equating Donald Trump and Saddam Hussein, and making it clear that they see him as just a two-bit dictator. And that formulation of Trump really matters. And this is not just about South Park, but about the way culture moves. So one of the things that I hear often is anger at the Democrats in the 1990s and the 2000s for not being more effective at standing up against the Republican supply side economics that managed to redistribute more than $50 trillion from the bottom 90% of the American people to the top 1%. And part of that is because Democrats who stood against that couldn't get elected. So the party sort of had to drag itself over, and not just in politics, but you can see this really in understandings of the economy. There were all sorts of ways in which the sheer weight of public support for the Republican program pulled everybody in that direction. And that's why when somebody like South Park takes the kind of stand that it did last night, that's a really big deal, because that will affect the way that the American people think about Donald Trump and the Republican regime. And that really matters in terms of the general way in which people think about politics. Now, when I say that, why is South Park so important? South Park is one of the most popular series out there. And just earlier this week, it did a major deal with Paramount for $1.5 billion over the next 10 years. And it's in the process of negotiating another major contract with Comedy Central that will be worth about $1 billion. And the reason that those numbers matter is because they indicate just how many people watch that show, which is why, of course, somebody like Paramount wants them. So they have a huge reach. They are enormously popular, and they're popular not primarily on the left. They're popular among the sort of people who look askance at authority figures in general. So a lot of that are going to be people who swing toward Trump and toward MAGA. So that's why that matters so much. Now, the other piece of that, I think, leads very naturally into what on earth is going on with CBS and Stephen Colbert and so on. And another reason that this episode was so important, and that is Paramount and I always get the name of it wrong. Sky, let me see, I've got it right here. Skydance. I always want to put a different word after Sky for that. Paramount and Skydance, since July of last year, have been trying to put together an $8 billion merger of the two organizations. And what has been a sticking point is that they need the approval of the Federal Communications Commission, or the FCC. And under Trump, the FCC is holding out for commitments from Skydance and Paramount that they are going to be on board the Trump train, if you will. Paramount is the parent company to CBS. Now you see where I'm going. So when CBS caved the other day and paid a $16 million settlement for Donald Trump's frivolous lawsuit about the idea that CBS had misleadingly cut Kamala Harris's interview before the 2024 election, what they probably were doing was simply greasing the skids so that Trump couldn't hold that over their heads. They basically made that problem go away for $16 million, which in an $8 billion merger is, lunch money. So they did that, and they also said that they were not going to renew Stephen Colbert's contract, and Stephen Colbert is a comedian. Those things are both probably designed to make that deal go through, to get the FCC to say that it's going to sign off on this merger. And today, Skydance said that when the merger goes through, they will make sure that they got any diversity, equity, and inclusion offices in Paramount, and that they will examine CBS News for bias against Trump, is what they say they're going to do. So that's also the backstory to South Park. It is as well this story about Stephen Colbert and about that $16 million and what was really going on with that. They're trying to buy off Trump, essentially, or at least so it looks. Now, there's something very interesting about that, though, that ties to where Trump is right now. And that's the fact, and I think I said this before here, I've said it somewhere, that CBS did not cancel Colbert outright. It's canceled him next May, and an awful lot of things can happen between now and next May. And what that says to me and to others is that CBS and Paramount are kind of hedging their bets, because by next May, who knows where we're going to be politically. And that suggests that there's a lot of flexibility right now in the political system, and that Trump is not as strong as he is trying to project. All right, so now let's go into the Epstein stuff, which is breaking like waves on a beach. We now know that Attorney General Pam Bondi and her deputy told Trump back in May that he was in the Epstein files. That was an exclusive from the Wall Street Journal yesterday. We know as well, of course, that that's what sparked Musk on June 5th to say, here's a bombshell, Trump's in the Epstein files, and then to back off. And that on July 15th, Trump told a reporter on camera that Bondi had not told him he was in the Epstein files, when now we know he did. So more and more stuff is continuing to come out, as, for example, CNN, I think it was yesterday, brought out more pictures of Trump and Epstein. This is hurting Trump to the point that a reporter today for the Bulwark, a guy named Joe Perticone, always worth reading, said that he's never seen the Republicans so panicked, because this is the first scandal from within the Republican Party, and it is splitting the Republican Party right now. Now, just as that is happening, the Republicans and the Democrats as well, but Congress is headed back home for the month of August, and Congress people are going to have to deal directly with their constituents, including those ones who voted for Donald Trump because they wanted the Epstein files released. And the other piece in here is that it's not clear what else Donald Trump can offer to Republicans in Congress. That is, they got through that omnibus bill, the budget reconciliation bill, with those massive tax cuts that they wanted. They've gotten huge cuts to social programs in the United States, which a lot of them didn't actually want because they knew it was going to hurt their constituents. But having gotten those things through, the only other thing that Trump can offer to them is judges on the courts, on the federal courts. And while some of them really do want these far right judges, many of them actually don't, because they're recognizing the destruction of the rule of law. And the importance of the rule of law, aside from the philosophical importance of it and the security of our lives, you need to have the rule of law in order to make money. I mean, there's a reason that autocrats stash their money in democracies, because otherwise, if they're an autocratic country, the guy who's running the country could just say, "Hey, I like your factory," and it would look, my nephew would look great as its president, so I'm just going to take it over. So there really is a drive among people who want to preserve the rights to property to having actual judges, real judges, not the Emile Beauvais of the world, in federal judgeships. So the only thing Trump really can give them still are those federal judgeships. And the other things that he is doing to the US are extraordinarily unpopular. And that's not helpful for the Republican Party. So what does that mean? A Gallup poll came out today of US adults. Always take a look at who has been polled, because it's US adults are different than US voters. They're different than US in general, et cetera. But US adults have turned against Trump to the point that he has just hit his lowest approval rating in his second term. Only 37% of American adults approve of the job he is doing in office. So 37% of Americans approve. That is 6 points below where Biden was after the final withdrawal from Afghanistan. And remember how, when that happened, the newspapers were all like, "That's it, his presidency is over." Trump is now 6 points below that. And where he has really taken the biggest hits are among independents. That matters, of course, to Republicans who would like to be elected, because they cannot be elected solely on Republicans unless they're in extremely gerrymandered districts. And independents have turned away from Trump to the point that at the beginning of his term, 46% of independents said they liked what he was doing. Now only 29% say they like what he is doing. The other big thing that we're looking ahead to in the next several months are the fact that one of the most unpopular programs that Trump has put into place is his immigration program. Now, he thinks that's his strongest suit, and he keeps talking about all the what he calls criminals and rapists that he is murderers and rapists that he's sending out of the country. But in fact, the vast majority of the people that they are sweeping up have no criminal record, no criminal convictions, and no criminal charges. These are people who've lived in the US for a long time. They're usually undocumented, although he has threatened to go after naturalized citizens, and they are being treated in ways that Americans do not approve of. That is in the detention center in the Everglades in Florida, for example. The place is alive with mosquitoes. People are living in cages. They're not getting medical care, and they're talking about it. So the popularity of Trump's immigration policies in that Gallup poll show that 60% of American adults disapprove of Trump's handling of immigration. Only 38% approve. That's a huge gap right there. And as more people learn more about what those immigration sweeps look like and detention looks like, and as the budget reconciliation bill increased funding for border security, ICE, and detention centers, we're going to see more and more of ICE and sort of attacking our neighbors and incarcerating them in conditions that are dramatically un-American, and or at least we've come to think of as being American. And we certainly have those in our past in a big way, but most of us liked that we had gotten away from those things. So we're seeing, for example, the fact that on last Friday, on July 18th, the men who had been incarcerated in El Salvador's CCOT prison were sent by El Salvador to Venezuela in exchange for Venezuela releasing 10 US citizens or permanent residents, and possibly putting some Venezuelans who had been political prisoners onto house arrest. When those prisoners went from CCOT to Venezuela, they talked about how they were treated in CCOT prison, and they talked about torture, they talked about beatings, they talked about being shot with rubber bullets, they talked about not having medical care. And while the US government has said that it had no control over the prisoners in CCOT, as soon as they had been moved to Venezuela, they took credit for that. So this is another thing sort of hanging around Americans' necks. Again, a reference back there to the rhyme of the Ancient Mariner. And the idea that somebody who killed an albatross, which is a good luck symbol on a boat, and thereby sending the boat into a rash of bad luck, his fellow sailors tied the albatross around his neck. So when we talk about a rotting bird around his neck, so when we talk about something being hung around their necks, that's a reference back to that famous poem, The Rhyme of the Ancient Mariner. All right, so that's unpopular. The immigration stuff is unpopular. Are the cuts that are in that budget reconciliation bill, which the Republicans passed, insisting that it would not increase the deficit. In fact, the Congressional Budget Office gave its final scoring of that bill earlier this week, and it said that, in fact, it would knock more than 10 million Americans off of healthcare and would cost $3.4 trillion. So your tax dollars are now going into tax cuts for billionaires and billionaires, but also very wealthy Americans and corporations, and into increased border security. What we're losing are things like the Federal Emergency Management Agency, or FEMA, which is, the head of search and rescue, quit earlier this week because he's frustrated with the cuts to FEMA. And the director of FEMA, David Richardson, told Congress earlier this week that he would not, he didn't tell them this, he would not confirm that FEMA is going to continue to exist. And for a lot of people, and I guess I shouldn't say that, I'm thinking of me, the idea that we're incarcerating people rather than bulking up FEMA when climate change is bearing down on all of us is a rejection of what governments are supposed to do. So the other things that are happening here are that we have just learned that, in fact, when Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth shared information about bombing the Houthis in Yemen over that Signal chat, in fact, some of the material he took was from an email that was marked secret. The White House has denied that, but we now have learned that's not the case. And we're also, what is the other thing that came out today? Cuts, the administration is working on cuts to the Environmental Protection Agency and its reasoning for addressing climate change. So wrapping all this stuff up together, from South Park through all these different things I laid down, what you're seeing, I think, is an administration that is floundering around a man who is increasingly unstable, increasingly unable to interact in public in a way that encourages people to support him. He has a hard time answering questions. He doesn't seem to know very much. He seems to be just spouting whatever comes to mind. And what has been coming to mind, especially as the Epstein issues ramp up, are things that were important to him in 2016. So he's attacking former Secretary of State Hillary Clinton again. He is attacking former President Barack Obama. Well, okay, but that was 9 years ago. And to attack Hillary Clinton, who's really been out of the public eye for that long, just isn't meaningful for a lot of people any longer. And I'm sitting here trying to remember even some of the failed presidential candidates in our past and thinking, did people really care about Bob Dole 9 years after he lost his bid for the presidency? And he had at least done TV commercials. So Trump is seemingly not as powerful a figure as he's been in the past. It is not clear what he can continue to deliver to Republicans, because the one thing he's been able to deliver all along has been the MAGA voters. They are now turning against him. And so I think what we're going to be seeing is fury on the part of the true believers in the administration, who recognize that they are losing power and that they're frantic because they have certainly seemingly broken a lot of laws. And if Trump is not there to protect them, they're going to be in trouble. But other people within the administration want to do stuff just because they want to make their mark on America, and Trump is their ticket for doing that. But so you're going to see frustration from them and increasing lashing out from them and from the people that they command. But people who are looking longer term at American politics, people perhaps like those behind the decision to stop Colbert's show, but not until May, are recognizing that politics is very much in flux right now. And one of the things that's going to happen in the month of August, you're starting to see it, but it's really going to take off in the fall, is the effect of the tariffs. So even the few deals that the administration has managed to deliver, and we don't really know the terms of those deals, still have tariffs at significantly higher than they were when he took office. So we are going to see price increases. We're already seeing this deal with Japan looks really bad for American automakers. You're going to see prices going up. You're going to see people trying to shop for their kids to go back to school and not being able to buy the things that they need to buy for their kids to go back to school. That's going to hit in the fall. And if you are somebody who is thinking long-term about politics, what you're really looking at right now is twofold. One is what's next for the Republican Party and who can carry it forward. The next person in line, of course, for the presidency is J.D. Vance. J.D. Vance is not popular. It's very unclear that he's going to be able to pick up the MAGA voters, maybe. But if that's the case, what are you going to do? How are you going to move the party? Who is going to step forward? And you'll be able to tell a lot by seeing who actually runs for Republicans in purple states and who doesn't, who backs out. And the other question is what the Democrats are going to do. Because one of the questions you all asked is, should the older Democrats step down? And the answer to that is, I think, I did an interview earlier today with Mallory McMorrow of Michigan. And what I think we are seeing is the same thing we've seen in other times of real transition. To my mind, as somebody who studies politics, because that's my role in all this, you want the older people around because they know the ropes. They know how to get things done, how to get things through committees and so on. But it's clear in this moment that we're seeing the rise of a new set of younger, not always, I mean, some of the most outspoken people are older, but a new set of people who are talking about politics in an authentic, in a powerful, in an emotional way, but on the Democratic side, actually being able to work with those older people to get stuff done is going to be really important, because the Republicans ran for a long time on destroying everything. You don't need older people if all you're going to do is destroy stuff. I mean, I can say no, but if you said to me, I need you to get this somewhat popular bill through Congress. I mean, I guess I would know how to do that just in terms of the logistics of it, but having somebody in there who really knows, somebody like Nancy Pelosi in there, who knows where the buttons are to push is incredibly important to actually get things done. And you see this in a number of times in history when a party of no tries to become a party of yes, and they can't do it. This is really dramatic after Woodrow Wilson was in office in the early 20th century. The Republicans had just said no for his entire term. Then they have a landslide election in 1920 and they control everything. And Congress can't figure out how to get anything done. So at the end of the day, it's Secretary of the Treasury, Andrew Mellon, and Secretary of Commerce, Herbert Hoover, who basically take up all that power that's sloshing around Congress, or around Washington. So what we're seeing right now, I think, is a lot of power sloshing around in our political system. And that's where I want to end tonight is as this power sloshes around and as your representatives and senators come back to their home districts, now is absolutely the time to make your voices heard, to make it clear what you're upset about, but also what you want going forward. Because now is the time when you're seeing new voices and new people get into politics. You're seeing people stepping out as well. And what people who are running for office want to know is that if they take a position, they can count on voters stepping up behind them to support them if they take that position. The same thing we didn't see with the Democrats in the 1990s and the 19aughts and the 20aughts, for example, because they knew that the popular culture was running toward the Republican cowboy individualism I talk so much about. So they had to at least be Me Too people, or they would simply be bled out of the system altogether. It's just kind of an aside here. Under Trump in his first term, there was a big fight over the fact that the person that he wanted to run the CIA had endorsed torture, which is, heinous. And somebody finally said, everybody who's at that level did the same thing. And that's a great example of what I'm talking about with the drift of a society or an institution in one direction. What happened was those people who stood against torture had been bled out of the ranks of the administration of the CIA. And as a result, the only people left were those people who had the same black marks against them that his nominee did. And so this is the time when you throw your weight in the pool and say, this is the drift of the future. We're going to care about these things, and you need to put your stamp on what those things are. You will not agree with everybody around you, but you'll find that you have an awful lot of people on your side when you start to develop the different things that you care about. Now, I did have Mallory McMorrow on because her new book is all about how individuals can affect politics. And that was why I wanted to have her on and why I wanted her to give us marching orders for what to do going forward. But somebody wrote to me afterward and made a really good point that I wanted to address. And if you're watching, I will try to address you in person as well. But I thought it was a good enough question that we should make it larger. And that is, what if that's just not you? You're not going to be able to get out there and go to a town hall or go to a school board meeting or run for office or knock on doors. If you're more introverted than that, and that's just not who you are. And I wanted to speak to that directly because, first of all, let me tell you, I'm there with you. But second of all of us have skills that we bring to society to make it better. And that doesn't mean you have to be like everybody else and knock on doors or give money to candidates or do the things that are overtly political. If you do what you love and you do it well and you put your heart into it, whatever that may be, you are working to create a society that supports the kind of progress that we are striving for. And just because it's not the sort of thing you see on a checklist, that doesn't mean it's not important. So whatever your skill is, maybe you fix computers, maybe you arrange flowers, maybe you bake, maybe you are really good at reading to children, maybe you paint. There's any number of these things you can do that contribute to making our society and our community better. And that counts. Even if it's not knocking on doors for a political candidate, it's creating community, it's supporting each other, it's creating the kind of world that we want to see. So don't lose hope and don't feel like you're not doing enough because of who you are. I mean, that's kind of what we're trying to value here, is the way in which all of us contribute to society. So I'm going to leave you with that tonight, a little bit shorter than I normally go, because I got a hot date tonight and I want to go get ready for it. So thank you for being here. And what is today? Today's Thursday. I think I'm doing, oh, you know what I'm doing Friday? I'm really excited about this, as you can tell. My friend Liza Donnelly and I we're actually working on something together. And I love her. She's a cartoonist. And I love the lightness of the way she handles very serious subjects. And for a long time now, I have wanted to do a Substack with her in which I don't quite know exactly what we're going to cover, but often she draws while I talk. And we'll see where it goes. I hope to do a lot of things with her going forward, because I just love to watch how she takes. Well, there you go. She's a cartoonist, and by bringing her extraordinary skill to our community, she's making the world a better place. So I didn't intend to have that be a segue into what we're doing tomorrow, but we are planning to do that tomorrow. And I will, I think, post where and how we're going to do that. I'm not sure. I haven't looked at my schedule. I'm not sure how it's going to be, but with luck, it'll be the first of many. And it should be inspiring, I think, if it's anything like Liza normally does. All right. Thank you for being here, and I will see you tomorrow.